Commander Elena Vasquez of the TSS Thunderchild grips the command rail as the gleaming alien vessels materialize from hyperspace, dwarfing her battleship in both size and apparent sophistication. The holographic display shows 7 ships, each easily 3 times the mass of her vessel, arranged in a perfect heptagonal formation that speaks of mathematical precision humanity could only aspire to. "Steady," she murmurs to her crew, sensing their tension. "Remember protocol. The Thunderchild wasn't humanity's newest vessel, nor its most impressive. The United Earth Navy had selected it precisely because it represented the reliable backbone of Terran space forces, not an experimental prototype that might malfunction, nor a venerable museum piece kept operational for tradition's sake. Just a workhorse military vessel with 15 years of service, bearing the scars and patches of countless deployments." Receiving transmission, Commander. Lieutenant Park reports from communications. They're requesting permission to send a diplomatic party aboard. "Granted," Vasquez replies. "Alert the reception team and security. Full diplomatic honors." 30 minutes later, Vasquez stands tall in her pressed dress uniform as the airlock cycles open. The aliens that emerge defy easy description, some tall and willowy with iridescent scales, others squat with multiple limbs and compound eyes. Their leader, introducing himself as High Emissary Zarketh of the Galactic Concordat, towers over the assembled humans, 6-fingered hands making graceful gestures as his translator device converts his musical language to English. "We have observed your civilization's emergence with great interest," Zarketh announces, mandibles clicking in what humans would later learn indicates mild amusement. "Your rapid technological development is unprecedented." The diplomatic reception proceeds according to protocol, with prepared statements and ceremonial gift exchanges. It's only when Zarketh requests a tour of the Thunderchild that the atmosphere shifts. "This is your bridge." The High Emissary's translator barely captures the incredulity in his voice as he observes the human command center. "So, analog." Commander Vasquez watches as the alien delegation exchanges, glances at the physical backup systems, the manual override controls, the hardwired emergency stations that operate independently of the ship's main computer. Our vessels achieve 94% greater efficiency through full automation and integrated systems, offers a Concordat engineer, a diminutive being with 4 arms and bioluminescent patches. "Your approach seems unnecessarily redundant." "Redundancy has its purposes," Vasquez replies diplomatically. Zarketh pauses before a damage control station, manipulating one of the manual fire suppression controls with obvious distaste. "Primitive hydraulics. You actually expect your crew to physically fight shipboard emergencies." "We find the human touch adaptable in crisis situations," Vasquez answers, noticing several of her officers bristling at the thinly veiled condescension. The tour continues to engineering, where the Concordat representatives openly scoff at the exposed pipes, manual release valves, and the chief engineer's workshop filled with spare parts and tools. "You repair systems during combat?" asks a Concordat officer, the translator conveying something between horror and disbelief. "When necessary," Vasquez confirms. Zarketh makes a sound that the translator doesn't capture, something like a chitter of superiority. "On our vessels, damaged systems are automatically isolated and alternatives activated. No crew intervention required." "And if the automation fails?" asks Chief Engineer Rodriguez. The question receives no direct answer, only a dismissive gesture that suggests such a possibility isn't worth considering. Later, in the diplomatic reception aboard the neutral station, where the first contact protocols continue, Vasquez endures a detailed explanation of the Concordat's political structure. 7 advanced species joined in a 12,000-year-old alliance that has brought stability to their corner of the galaxy. "Your civilization," Zarketh explains with the patient tone one might use with a child, "while impressive for its youth, lacks the refinement for full membership status. We propose Earth join as a protected associate, under Concordat guidance." Vasquez maintains her diplomatic smile, but inwardly seethes at the patronizing offer. Earth, after clawing its way to the stars through centuries of scientific advancement, would become effectively a client state to these elegant, arrogant aliens. The negotiations are interrupted by a station-wide alarm. Captain Wei Chen hunches over holographic schematics aboard the TFS Copernicus, his eyes burning from 20 hours of continuous analysis. The research vessel's laboratory hums with activity as his team dissects every frame of sensor data from the pirate attack on the diplomatic station. "Play that simulation again," he orders, voice rough from too much coffee and too little sleep. The holographic display resets, showing virtual representations of the Concordat vessels alongside the pirate ships. The simulation begins. Energy weapons slice through the Concordat's elegant defensive fields like they don't exist. Wei freezes the display at the critical moment. "There," he points. The Concordat shields create a perfect geometric barrier based on overlapping energy matrices. Dr. Lakshmi Patel, his chief engineer, nods. "Mathematically perfect, assuming the attacking weapon operates within expected parameters." But the pirates were using phased quantum disruptors, Wei continues, which fluctuate between states faster than the Concordat shields can adapt. Wei expands a different section of the simulation, the moment when Commander Vasquez positioned the Thunderchild to absorb hits meant for the diplomatic vessel. "Now look here," he says, highlighting the human ship's defensive systems. "Our shields aren't as elegant, but they're layered with deliberate inconsistencies in the pattern. Some of the pirate fire gets through, but never a clean shot to critical systems." Lakshmi manipulates the display to show a Concordat vessel cut in half by a single well-placed shot. Their ships are designed around a central power core that feeds all systems through optimized pathways. One disruption, and the entire vessel becomes useless. Wei finishes. 3 hours later, Wei presents his findings to Admiral Hernandez in a secure briefing room at Lunar Command. The holographic table projects a cutaway comparison of Concordat and Terran vessel architecture. Their ships are like crystal sculptures, beautiful, perfect, and catastrophically fragile. Wei explains, highlighting the Concordat's centralized systems. One key node fails, and cascading failures follow a predictable mathematical progression. Hernandez studies the Terran vessel displayed alongside it, a chaotic-looking arrangement of redundant systems, isolated compartments, and manual bypasses. "And ours?" he asks, though he knows the answer. "We build ships like organisms that can survive trauma," Wei replies, running a simulation showing a Terran vessel absorbing damage that would destroy a Concordat ship. "They build ships like machines that must remain pristine." Hernandez nods, leaning back in his chair. "The survivability doctrine," he says quietly. "Sir, it's what my old commander called it," Hernandez explains. "Humanity's approach to warfare isn't about avoiding damage. It's about continuing to function despite it." He stands, walking to the viewport overlooking Earth. "We've spent our history trying to kill each other in increasingly creative ways. We learned the hard way that perfect systems fail perfectly." Wei pulls up another simulation. The Concordat's approach makes sense for a civilization that evolved through diplomatic cooperation rather than competition. Their ships reflect their history, elegant solutions to theoretical problems. But they've never faced an enemy that could adapt to their standardized defenses. Meanwhile, aboard the Concordat intelligence vessel, Silent Observer, Chief Analyst Trell reviews recordings of Terran naval exercises with mounting concern. The footage shows Terran ships deliberately ramming each other in drills, continuing operations despite damage that would render Concordat vessels derelict. "Barbaric," mutters her assistant. "They train for failure rather than perfection. They treat their beautiful machines like disposable tools." Trellvox agrees, unable to hide her revulsion. And their crews celebrate this barbarism. She forwards her findings to Concordat High Command with a troubling assessment. Terran vessels display an irrational capacity to maintain combat effectiveness, despite suffering damage beyond standard catastrophic thresholds. This philosophy poses potential security concerns should diplomatic relations deteriorate. Back on the Copernicus, Wei's team makes a breakthrough, cracking encrypted communications from the pirate vessels. As the decryption algorithm completes its work, Wei's blood runs cold. These weren't random pirates, he tells Lakshmi, pointing to the decoded star charts. They're advanced scouts for something much larger, probing Concordat defenses. He expands the chart, revealing a projected attack vector aimed directly at Nix-9, a jewel of Concordat civilization with billions of inhabitants. We need to warn them, Lakshmi says. Wei's expression darkens. Will they believe us? After they dismissed our ships as primitive. The question hangs in the air as Wei prepares his emergency report to Earth Command, knowing that the lives of billions now hang in the balance, and that humanity's primitive approach to warfare might be their only salvation. Commander Jackson Okafor stands frozen on the bridge of the TFS Relentless as his task force drops out of FTL near Nix-9. The tactical display reveals a graveyard of ships where the Concordat defense fleet should be, elegant vessels now reduced to scattered debris fields. Sensor analysis, he demands, voice tight with controlled tension. Concordat distress signals across all frequencies, sir, reports his tactical officer. Civilian evacuation in progress, but severely compromised. Orbital defense platforms have been systematically destroyed. Lieutenant Commander Rivera, his XO, moves close enough to whisper, "They didn't believe our warning." Okafor's jaw tightens. Earth Command had sent the intelligence about the impending attack through diplomatic channels 3 days ago. The Concordat High Command had dismissed it as speculative analysis based on limited datasets and alarmist interpretation by an inexperienced spacefaring species. Now billions would pay the price for that arrogance. "Sir," calls the communications officer, "we're receiving a direct transmission from the planetary command center." The main screen flickers to life, revealing the haggard face of planetary magistrate Kelshar. The normally elegant Concordat official's scales have lost their luster, and one of her sensory frills hangs torn. "Terran vessels," she begins, formal even in crisis. "Your presence is acknowledged. The situation is beyond salvage. Our mathematical models indicate." A distant explosion rocks her command center, cutting her off momentarily. "Indicate that even with your ships, we can save only 27% of our population before the harvesters return. We are implementing the Concordat Crisis Protocol. Selective evacuation of essential personnel and cultural repositories." Okafor feels a cold fury building in his chest. Selective evacuation. Resources are finite. Kelshar responds with fatalistic calm. "The calculations are clear." "Screw your calculations," Okafor replies, his voice steady despite his anger. "We don't fight based on mathematical models. All hands to battle stations. We're evacuating everyone we can." The magistrate's compound eyes widen. "That is not logically sound. The enemy force will return within 6 hours with overwhelming numbers. Your 5 vessels cannot. Watch us." Okafor cuts her off. Relentless out. He turns to his bridge crew. "Deploy evacuation protocols. I want every shuttle, cargo hauler, and lifeboat we have running continuous evacuation cycles. Contact the civilian vessels in orbit. Tell them we'll provide combat screen while they load refugees." "Sir," Rivera interjects, "Concordat ships are designed for minimal crew. Their civilian vessels can carry maybe a tenth of what ours can." "Then we get creative," Okafor replies. "Have engineering rig atmospheric force fields in our cargo base. We'll pack them if we have to." 4 hours later, the evacuation is proceeding at a chaotic pace that would horrify Concordat efficiency experts, but is saving thousands more than their projections allowed. The Relentless's cargo bays are packed with refugees, environmental systems straining to accommodate triple their designed capacity. "Harvester fleet detected," announces the tactical officer. Multiple signatures emerging from FTL. Configuration matches nothing in our databases. The main screen displays the approaching ships. If ships is even the right term. They appear almost organic, with asymmetrical hulls that pulse with internal light. They move not in the precise formations of the Concordat, but in a swarming pattern reminiscent of predatory insects. A captured transmission flickers across a secondary screen, revealing the first clear image of the enemy. The bridge crew falls silent as they stare at a being that resembles a nightmarish fusion of insect and machine, with too many limbs and eyes that glow with cold intelligence. The harvesters, whispers Rivera. They're not just pirates, Okafor realizes. They're hunting. Consuming. The tactical display updates as the harvester ships deploy, clearly intending to cut off the evacuation routes. Concordat vessels, still following their predetermined evacuation protocols, begin to scatter in panic. They're going to be picked off individually, Okafor notes grimly. Tactics: coordinate with all available Concordat vessels. We're forming a defensive perimeter around the evacuation corridor. Sir, the tactical officer objects. The Concordat captains are refusing to deviate from their programmed escape vectors. They say formation combat against superior numbers is mathematically untenable. Okafor's expression hardens. Then we do it ourselves. All Terran vessels, battle formation Delta. We stand between those refugees and the harvesters. As the 5 human ships move into position, a formation that any Concordat tactician would declare suicidal, Okafor opens a channel to all Terran vessels. This is Commander Okafor. We all know the odds. But remember what we fight for today. Not for glory, not for Earth, but for the oldest human duty there is. Protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Every civilian we save is a victory. Fight smart, fight dirty, and remember, a ship isn't dead until its crew stops fighting. The harvesters hit them like a tsunami. The grand chamber of the Concordat falls silent as Dr. Amara Patel's presentation reaches its most disturbing segment. The holographic display above the council table shifts from primitive stone axes to gunpowder weapons, then to machine guns, guided missiles, nuclear devices, antimatter bombs, and beyond. Thousands of instruments of death invented by a single species. 7 alien representatives, each from a founding Concordat civilization, stare in undisguised horror at the progression. The airy chamber, with its flowing architecture and harmonic sound elements designed to facilitate peaceful discourse, seems violated by these images of increasingly efficient killing tools. This is merely a sampling, Dr. Patel explains, her voice calm despite the tension in the room. Earth's military archives catalog over 100,000 distinct weapon designs created throughout our history. We call this adaptive lethality, the ability to develop specialized tools of warfare for any environment or threat. The Concordat Security Minister, Arvex, a towering avian being with iridescent plumage, raises a feathered appendage. But why? The translator renders his musical speech into flat English. Our species standardized military technology during our Unity Age, focusing on perfecting a limited set of weapons. Achieving harmonic consistency, adds another counselor. Dr. Patel's response is unnervingly matter-of-fact, because humans learn that standardization equals predictability, and in warfare, becoming predictable means death. The chamber erupts in multilingual argument as faction representatives debate the implications. On secondary screens, surveillance footage from Nix-9 plays, human ships functioning despite catastrophic damage, improvised weapons deployed from seemingly destroyed vessels, crew members fighting on despite injuries that would incapacitate Concordat species. One recording shows a Terran vessel, its main drives destroyed, deliberately venting reactor plasma as makeshift propulsion to position itself between harvester ships and a civilian transport. Another shows damage control teams converting environmental systems into improvised weapons when conventional armaments fail. You transformed life support equipment into disruptor fields, asks the science minister, mandibles clicking in dismay. Adaptation under pressure, Patel confirms. It's the foundation of Earth's military doctrine. The first speaker, eldest of the council, leans forward. Your history suggests a species consumed by violence. Yet your vessels at Nix-9 sacrificed themselves for our civilians, beings you had met mere days before. Humanity's capacity for violence is matched only by our capacity for compassion. Paddle responds. We've spent millennia learning the cost of war, which is why we're so effective at it. We fight fiercely precisely because we understand what's at stake. In a private chamber afterward, Admiral Hernandez meets with the Concordat High Command. Intelligence reports spread across the table show a pattern of harvester attacks systematically eliminating Concordat outposts. One particularly disturbing analysis suggests the harvesters have been deliberately testing Concordat defenses, learning their predictable responses. They're probing your weaknesses, Hernandez explains, pointing to a pattern of increasingly sophisticated attacks. Each encounter, they adapt their approach based on your responses. How could they predict our defensive protocols? Asks the Concordat Supreme Strategist, ancient even by his species standards. Because you haven't changed them in 1,000 years, Hernandez responds bluntly. Your civilization has known peace so long you've forgotten how to fight an adaptive enemy. He brings up a tactical simulation showing harvester attack patterns evolving to counter standard Concordat formations. The mathematical perfection you prize becomes your greatest vulnerability when facing an enemy that learns, he continues. Your ships, your tactics, your responses, all can be predicted and countered once their pattern is understood. The Concordat commanders exchange troubled glances. We're offering an exchange, Hernandez says, laying out his proposal. Our warfare doctrine for your advanced technology, a partnership where both civilizations contribute their strengths. The Concordat Supreme Strategist fixes Hernandez with compound eyes that have witnessed centuries of galactic history. You're asking us to contaminate our civilization with your philosophy of violence. I'm offering you the only chance your civilization has to survive. Hernandez counters without flinching. The harvesters adapt. You don't. That ends today. Surveillance footage from Nix-9 continues playing on a screen behind him. Commander Okafor's battered vessels still fighting after absorbing damage that by all Concordat tactical models should have rendered them combat ineffective. Your models predicted the destruction of your colony within hours, Hernandez reminds them. 5 human ships held back the harvesters for 3 days, not because our technology is superior. It isn't. But because when their perfect plan failed, our people improvised. When their ships were damaged, they kept fighting. When standard weapons were insufficient, they invented new ones. The Concordat leaders confer in their native languages, a musical debate beyond human translation. Finally, the Supreme Strategist turns back to Hernandez. We will consider your proposal, he says, voice heavy with the weight of decision. But know this. If we accept, the Concordat will be forever changed. Hernandez nods solemnly. That's the point. Change or perish. The choice all civilizations face eventually. Lieutenant Sofia Rodriguez wipes hydraulic fluid from her face as she confronts the Concordat chief engineer. Around them, the gleaming interior of the flagship Eternal Harmony has been transformed into a chaotic construction zone. Human work crews dismantle pristine panels to expose the ship's systems, while Concordat technicians watch with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright horror. You're destroying perfection. The Concordat engineer, master builder Killeth, gestures with all 4 arms at the humans, installing redundant power conduits and emergency bulkheads. His iridescent exoskeleton flushes with colors that the translator doesn't capture, but Rodriguez recognizes as distress. These crude additions are reducing our efficiency by 24.3%. Efficiency isn't worth anything if you're dead, Rodriguez counters, pulling up schematics on her tablet. She zooms in on a junction where 15 critical systems converge through a single routing node. One hit here, and your entire ship loses life support, weapons, and propulsion simultaneously. That's not a design. It's a death trap. Killeth's secondary eyes blink rapidly in the Concordat equivalent of exasperation. The probability of an enemy weapon striking precisely at that juncture is mathematically insignificant. Tell that to the crews who died at Nix-9. Rodriguez responds, her voice softening slightly. The harvesters targeted exactly those kinds of critical nodes. They've studied your designs, learned your vulnerabilities. She leads Caleth through a section where humans are installing manual override controls next to the ship's automated systems. A team is converting an elegant utility passage into a hardened damage control station with physical tools and emergency equipment. Your ships are like thoroughbred racehorses, Rodriguez explains. Beautiful, fast, efficient, but break one leg, and they're finished. We're teaching you to build ships like Wolverines, not as pretty, but they'll keep fighting even when half dead. Throughout the Eternal Harmony, similar scenes unfold as humans implement compartmentalization, manual overrides, and backup systems. Concordat crew members watch with emotions ranging from fascination to disgust as their perfect vessel is transformed. In the officers' mess, a group of Concordat engineers discuss the changes with barely contained indignation. They're installing physical pipes and valves. One complains, physical, as if we've regressed 1,000 years. I observe them creating redundant power routing that serves no purpose under normal operations. Another adds, wasted mass and energy. A younger engineer, Trelmar, who has been working closely with the humans, interjects hesitantly. The human engineer explained it to me. They don't design for normal operations. They design for catastrophic failure. The tension reaches a breaking point 3 weeks into the refit when saboteurs, Concordat purists, damage newly installed systems, nearly causing a catastrophic reactor breach. Only the quick action of a human damage control team prevents disaster. The ship's commander, Lord Captain Xenos, calls an all-hands assembly in the main hangar bay. His tall, angular form radiates authority as he addresses his crew, the humans standing awkwardly apart. I understand your reservations, he begins, his translator rendering his speech in multiple languages simultaneously. Our vessels have been paragons of technological harmony for generations. These modifications seem crude, inelegant, wasteful. He activates a large display showing footage from Nix-9, Concordat vessels disabled by single hits, while human ships continue fighting despite catastrophic damage. But consider this. For 12 millennia, our ship designs have remained essentially unchanged. In that same period, these humans have evolved from primitive chemical rockets to vessels that can match ours, because they never stopped adapting. The true test comes during a joint training exercise when a cascading systems failure, later determined to be another act of sabotage, causes an explosion that tears through 3 decks. Alarms wail as Concordat crew members rush to evacuation pods, following centuries of protocol that dictates abandonment when ship integrity falls below 70%. They stop short, watching in disbelief as human damage control teams rush toward the disaster. Rodriguez leads a team wearing only basic protective gear into a radiation-flooded section, manually sealing breaches while engineers reroute critical systems through newly installed redundant pathways. 6 hours later, against all Concordat mathematical models, the Eternal Harmony limps back to space dock under its own power. In the officers' mess, a junior Concordat officer hesitantly approaches a table of exhausted, bandaged humans. "How did you know?" she asks, her translator struggling to convey her mix of awe and confusion. "How did you know exactly which systems would fail and need backups?" Rodriguez looks up from her meal, her face still bearing burns from the rescue operation. "We didn't. We just assume everything will fail eventually and plan accordingly." The phrase spreads throughout the Concordat fleet. Plan for failure. Initially spoken with derision, it gradually becomes a grudging acknowledgement of wisdom. As the retrofitted Eternal Harmony becomes the template for a fleet-wide refit, intelligence reports grow dire. Long-range scouts report massive harvester fleet movements, not raiding parties but armadas capable of overwhelming entire systems. In a secure briefing room, tactical officers from both species pore over the data. A Concordat analyst points to the projected path with trembling appendages. They're targeting our core worlds. This isn't raiding, it's extinction. Admiral Elena Vasquez stands before the holographic tactical display, her weathered face illuminated by the representation of over 2,000 vessels, the largest combined fleet in Concordat history. Human battleships and cruisers, their hulls now augmented with Concordat technology, stand alongside retrofitted alien vessels sporting the blocky additions of human-inspired survivability systems. Opposite them, emerging from 11 separate jump points, comes a harvester swarm so vast it appears as a single mass on long-range sensors. Their approach vectors indicate knowledge of standard Concordat defensive formations, warns Supreme Tactician Zorvex, his ceremonial armor glinting under the emergency lights. His upper limbs trace patterns in the air as he manipulates the tactical display. Our simulations show 89% losses if we engage conventionally. Vasquez nods grimly. Then we won't engage conventionally. She manipulates the display, creating a formation that causes the Concordat officers to erupt in protest. The human-inspired pattern deliberately creates gaps and apparent vulnerabilities in their defensive line. This is madness. Zorvex gestures frantically at the simulation, which shows harvester forces rapidly exploiting the weaknesses. You're deliberately creating vulnerable sectors in our line. No, Vasquez corrects, voice steady. I'm creating bait. The hush that follows is broken by a human officer's quiet explanation. The harvesters have studied your standard formations. They expect geometric perfection. We're giving them what appears to be structural weakness, but is actually a trap, finishes a Concordat captain who had served at Nix 9. Like the Terran vessel that appeared crippled, then detonated its auxiliary fuel cells when the harvesters moved in to consume it. Vasquez's eyes gleam with grim determination. Exactly. We're not fighting to preserve our formation. We're fighting to make them commit to theirs. What follows is the most brutal space battle in recorded history. The human-designed formation initially appears to falter, with harvester forces punching through apparent weaknesses, only to find themselves trapped in killing zones where overlapping fields of fire from seemingly isolated vessels catch them in devastating crossfire. The harvesters adapt quickly, adjusting their assault patterns, but the combined fleet shifts in response, never settling into a predictable defensive posture. Where Concordat doctrine would have maintained rigid formations regardless of casualties, the new approach treats the fleet as a fluid entity, components shifting and adapting as damage accumulates. On the third day, with both fleets bloody beyond recognition, Vasquez stands on the bridge of her flagship, now exposed to space in sections and running on auxiliary power. Half her crew is dead or wounded. Across the fleet, similar scenarios play out as ships refuse to die, operating far beyond their theoretical breaking points. Concordat vessels that would have been abandoned under previous protocols continue fighting with jury-rigged weapons and emergency power. Human train damage control teams work alongside Concordat engineers, implementing solutions that would never appear in any technical manual. The harvesters are regrouping, reports her XO, Commander Trent, voice raspy from smoke inhalation. His uniform is torn, one arm hastily bandaged. They're adapting to our distributed command structure, shifting to target our communication nodes. Vasquez studies the tactical display where a concentration of larger harvester vessels, the command ships, has been identified. They finally moved into a formation suggesting hierarchical organization rather than swarm intelligence. They're centralizing, she murmurs, becoming predictable. After a moment's calculation, she opens a fleet-wide channel. Task Force Thermopylae. This is Admiral Vasquez. Execute Operation Leonidas. Throughout the fleet, commanders exchange knowing glances. 300 ships, a mixture of human and Concordat vessels, all critically damaged and volunteered for this mission. Break formation and accelerate toward the Harvester Command concentration. Aboard the Concordat vessel Luminous Truth, Lord Captain, Xantai turns to his human advisor. Your admiral has named this operation after a famous last stand from your history. The human nods solemnly. The 300 who held back an empire. You Terrans, and your poetic death wishes. Xantai responds, but there's no derision in his voice anymore. Only a warrior's respect as he guides his crippled vessel toward the Harvester command ships. The task force vessels, their reactors deliberately destabilized, plow into the Harvester formation. The resulting chain reaction tears a hole in space-time itself, consuming the Harvester command structure and a third of the human Concordat fleet in a blinding conflagration that temporarily overloads all sensor systems. In the stunned silence that follows, the remaining Harvester vessels, suddenly uncoordinated, are methodically eliminated by the surviving fleet vessels, ships so damaged they should not function, yet fought on through human ingenuity and Concordat technology. Days later, as the Allied fleet limps home, a Concordat elder observes a ceremony where human crew members designate damaged but surviving ships as wounded warriors, treating the vessels with a reverence normally reserved for living beings. Turning to Vasquez, the elder remarks with newfound understanding. Now I comprehend why humans refer to vessels as female. They are most formidable when they should, by all logic, have already perished. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Concordat reverberates with heated debate. 6 months after the Battle of Broken Shields, the 7-member species are deeply divided. The tiered chamber, once a model of harmonic discourse, has become a battleground of ideology. On one side stand the adaptationists, many bearing the distinctive scars of veterans who fought alongside humans. Their leader, Admiral Krelvor, a grizzled veteran missing 2 of his 4 arms, stands at the central podium. His remaining limbs bear the crude but effective prosthetics designed by human medical engineers, functional rather than aesthetically pleasing. The statistics of survival cannot be disputed, he argues, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into multiple languages. The retrofitted vessels sustained 43% more damage than would have been survivable under traditional Concordat doctrine, while maintaining 67% combat effectiveness. Opposite him, the purists protest with elegant rhetoric and flawless logical arguments. Their spokesperson, High Philosopher Zenthar, approaches the podium with the flowing grace characteristic of his species. The statistics are irrefutable, he concedes, his slender form trembling with emotion. Yes, human military doctrine saved us from the Harvesters, but at what cost? He activates a holographic display showing cultural metrics. Violence-oriented thinking has increased 43% among our youth. Applications to traditionally peaceful vocations have declined while military service requests have tripled. Murmurs ripple through the assembly as Zenthar continues. We face a philosophical invasion more insidious than any Harvester attack. Our 12 millennia of cultural harmony is being eroded by Terran brutality disguised as pragmatism. The adaptationist leader, Admiral Krelvor, counters by activating footage from the battle. The holographic display shows human and retrofitted Concordat ships taking damage that would have destroyed conventional vessels, yet continuing to fight. Philosophy won't say who had shared so much technology, had kept their most advanced systems secret, yet when attacked, used them with surgical precision to minimize Concordat losses rather than retaliating with overwhelming force. In a private chamber, the Concordat High Council confronts the human delegation led by Admiral Hernandez. You could have annihilated those platforms, says Arch-Counselor Varthex, compound eyes reflecting the holographic displays of the recaptured stations. Yet you risk your own people to save ours, even those attacking you. Hernandez's response is simple. Destructive capability isn't the same as the willingness to use it. Earth learned that lesson through centuries of nearly destroying ourselves. On the observation deck of the newly commissioned Alliance vessel, Resilient Harmony, Ambassador Jackson Okafor stands with representatives from 17 species. The vast circular chamber, with its transparent dome revealing the stars, represents a perfect fusion of Concordat aesthetics and human practicality. Beautiful, yet reinforced to survive direct hits. elegant, yet containing emergency systems behind every panel. Below them stretches the vast shipyard where vessels of revolutionary design take form, elegant, yet formidable, efficient, yet redundant, beautiful, yet terrible. We call it the doctrine of equilibrium. Okafor explains to the assembled dignitaries, many from systems seeking protection from the approaching threat. His dress uniform bears both Earth and Concordat insignia, symbols of his dual role as human ambassador and joint fleet commander, the perfect balance between human survivability and Concordat precision. The Concordat Grand Engineer Tixpen manipulates the holographic display to reveal the innovative inner workings of these new vessels. Her exoskeleton, once purely decorative, now incorporates functional elements inspired by human combat armor. Human designs taught us to build ships that can function with 70% systems loss, she explains, highlighting redundant pathways and isolated compartments. Our technology taught them to prevent that loss in the first place. The display shifts to show advanced shield harmonics and predictive evasion systems that reduce the likelihood of critical hits. Together, Okafor continues, we've created vessels that embody the strengths of both our civilizations, not compromises, but synthesis, something greater than either approach alone. A diplomatic aide rushes in, interrupting the presentation. The young Concordat aide's colors shift rapidly in the species equivalent of alarm. It's happening. The entity has breached the Orpheus Veil. Throughout the combined fleet, crews rush to battle stations. On the newly forged flagship Indomitable Purpose, Admiral Elena Vasquez and High Commander Zarketh, once diplomatic adversaries, now brothers in arms, study the sensor readings of an entity so vast it distorts space-time around it. All those centuries we thought we were alone. Zarketh muses, his once pristine uniform now bearing the practical modifications of human design. The ceremonial armor that once signified rank now incorporates functional protection. We built beautiful ships and wrote elegant treatises on cosmic harmony. While we built increasingly effective ways to kill each other, Vasquez adds with grim irony, the scars on her face from the Battle of Broken Shields catch the light from the tactical display. Now we need both approaches to survive. The entity defies conventional description. Part living mass, part machine intelligence, part twisted physics. As it launches its first attack, using weapons that bypass traditional defenses, the combined fleet responds with coordinated precision. Ships take damage that would have been fatal under old designs, but continue fighting. Concordat precision targeting, enhanced by human adaptability, finds vulnerabilities in the seemingly invulnerable foe. In a desperate gambit, a squadron of the new hybrid vessels executes a maneuver that would have been impossible with either purely human or purely Concordat designs, diving through a tear in reality created by the entity, deploying specially designed payload directly into the creature's equivalent of a central nervous system. The battle lasts 12 days. When it ends, nearly half the combined fleet is destroyed or crippled. The entity retreats, wounded but not defeated. It's only the first engagement in what will clearly be a long war. In its aftermath, as recovery and rebuilding begin, word spreads throughout the galaxy. Surveillance footage from the battle becomes the most watched recording in Concordat history. Diplomatic envoys from previously isolationist species arrive seeking alliance membership. Merchant vessels petition for retrofit with human-inspired systems. Aboard a medical ship, a wounded Zarketh, once the haughty diplomat who dismissed humans as primitives, records a message to be broadcast toward the retreating entity. Be warned, these vessels you face embody the will of a species that has never ceased fighting, not once in 15,000 years of their history. Their ships are built with the knowledge that peace is precious precisely because it is fragile. They design for catastrophe because they have lived it. You may destroy us, but so long as a single human-inspired vessel remains, with a crew that refuses to accept defeat, you will never conquer us. Throughout known space, military strategists study the battle recordings with growing unease. The implicit message becomes clear to all intelligent species. Avoid conflict with the human Concordat Alliance at all costs, for their vessels are designed not merely to win battles, but to endure them, to absorb punishment that would destroy conventional ships and still deliver devastation upon their enemies. From diplomatic stations to frontier outposts, a new expression enters the lexicon of spacefaring species: terran endurance, the quality that transforms a damaged vessel from helpless prey into its most dangerous form. In the shipyards orbiting Earth, a Concordat exchange student watches human engineers teaching their alien counterparts. "Your people fought each other for millennia," she observes to her human mentor. "Yet you risked everything to save beings you had only just met." "That's the real human doctrine," the engineer replies as they watch a new class of vessel take shape before them. "We fight hardest for what we care about most."